This is the Dreadful Podcast from TV Podcast Industries, and we're watching Penny Dreadful, City of Angels, Episode 7, Maria and the Beast.
My family may be at the center of this chess game of yours. But we are not pawns. We are kings and queens. And the blood of the Aztecs runs through us. The soldiers of the revolution walk beside us. And as long as I draw breath from my lungs, I will claw through mud. I will climb hills, and I will fight you to the end of days. In the name of my children, whom God knit together in my womb, I banish you from this place!
Welcome back, fellow Penny Faithful. This is TV Podcast Industries. We're talking about Penny Dreadful, City of Angels, Episode 7, Maria and the Beast. Does anybody want to sing Beauty and the Beast with that one?
Well, I was thinking the Beast is 666, actually, from Hannibal.
That's cooler, and they do have the ACD song. The Beast is 666, I think, as well.
And to be honest, the Beast is Frank,
Yeah,
who would kill a cute, innocent, fluffy hamster.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I just have Maria and the Beast in my head. I left that.
But
I
it has
sang
to be
it
in the
this
German accent.
Yeah,
Ja, Maria and the Beast. Or the Boost. No.
Excellent. Let's cut Chris off there and say I'm Derek, one of your hosts.
Hello there, fellow Dreadfuls and fellow Penny Faithful. I am one of your other hosts, John.
And I've already been mentioned as being Chris, but I like to be cut off, so it's great.
Excellent.
Just only when I do my terrible German accent.
Yeah, we will try and cut you off every time you do that, Chris, I promise.
Okay, good to know.
Fellow Penny Faithful, we are a little bit tired today from a very long podcast that we did yesterday. We have released our Patreon exclusive podcast on Captain America, the Winter Soldier, which we have been promising for a few weeks, but we did get around to recording it yesterday. Great discussion. Really enjoyed that, guys. It was really fun to talk about some Marvel stuff, because we've been going very serious with things like Watchmen and even The Witcher, which was quite in depth when we talked about that, and then going into Penny Dreadful, City of Angels, and all 3 seasons of Penny Dreadful, all quite deep stuff that we've been doing. So getting back to a good comic book action movie was great fun to talk about.
I forgot how much I loved it. I really did.
Yeah.
It's good to be back in the MCU, even though we're not.
Mm-hmm.
I actually am. I'm disappointed that we aren't going back as soon as we are with Black Widow. I'm actually now more excited to go back to the cinema in August, September,
Maybe July.
Oh, I think Black Widow was pushed back to November. They moved it out. They moved all the Marvel movies out to the next dates that were on the schedule.
Okay.
So it's November.
I thought you just meant going back to the cinema.
Yes, hopefully going back to the cinema in July. That would be very cool. But yeah, just a quick return to the MCU for our fellow watchers over on Patreon. You can get access to that podcast if you go over to patreon.com/TV Podcast Industries and contribute any amount and hear us talk about some comic booky stuff.
Yeah, it was good to get back into the old comics and the Marvel universe. And the movie really holds up. So it's a good movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And look, any amount you can give in at any time is always fantastic. It helps keeps the mics on, the lights on, and it's just a lovely way for us to give back to you as well. So jump on, have a listen, and of course, if you can't do that, just share our podcast, because sharing a podcast is
sharing the love. But remember, Chris, as well, we have an army of hamsters on their wheels. That's what keeps the lights on here. So Frank's not going anywhere near them. Along with our cat.
Absolutely. But it does cost a lot to feed them, that army of hamsters running our podcast. So
with their cute little cheeks all pouched out with nuts and seeds.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, you can support us however you want to, whether that's in seeds and nuts, that's fine as well. Salted preferably, but for sure. Any way you want to, you can leave a review and rate us, as Chris says. And speaking of reviews, we have an iTunes review for TV podcast industries. Really nice to get it through from Gleaming Circuit over there on the US Apple Podcasts. Gleaming Circuit says, great show covering great shows, which is lovely to hear, because, we certainly do select our shows. Yeah. So I'm glad someone is in tune and in sync with our choices. Yeah.
I'm thinking of stealing that as our actual log line for TV podcast industries. That's pretty good.
That is a great one, actually. His 5-star review says, this is a fantastic listen. You get your breakdown of the episode with thoughtful insights, a little humor when appropriate, serious group up discussion where it fits, with a fan's enthusiasm. If you live in the US, it's great to get the perspective from this great team in Ireland. They're critical without being mean and stay focused on the content of the shows they cover. Refreshing and highly recommended. That's really nice, Gleaming Circuit. Thanks so much. I mean, it's just nice to get the feedback, to know that, we hit the marks, and what we're doing is being taken up, I suppose, in the way it's intended, which I think this really does reflect that. So, thanks so much, Gleaming Circuit.
Yeah, really nice to hear from you, Gleaming Circuit. Thank you so much for that. Always good to get a review of that quality as well, of that caliber over on iTunes. So, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much. 5 stars puts 5 stars on my shoulders and my heart.
You're a 5-star general.
Yes. That is, oh my God. Yes. That makes no sense in my head where I was about to go, but does not matter. I will let our listeners, any of our long-time listeners will know what I was about to go for. So,
Chris, I've known you 20 years. I have no idea where you were going. Or 15 years.
But then you don't know me well enough.
That's true. Let's get into our discussion about Penny Dreadful, City of Angels, Episode 7, Maria and the Beast. The episode was directed by Sheree Folkson, a UK director, worked on many shows over the years. In the UK, worked on Call the Midwife, which is from the same production company, weirdly, as Penny Dreadful, and also worked on Doctor Who. More recently, Sheree worked on 12 Monkeys TV series and American Horror Story Season 8. We've kind of mentioned a few times that Penny Dreadful's City of Angels does have a little bit of a American Horror Story kind of vibe to it at times, where it feels like we're in this new world which is just slightly twisted with the supernatural. So I guess Sheree's brought on some of that knowledge from American Horror Story, particularly in some scenes in this episode.
Yeah, I've never been a big AHS fan.
Really?
My wife is, and she loves it, and I think she even fell off after a while. I don't know why. I love horror. Yeah. I love horror. It's just, it never fully clicked with me. 12 Monkeys was a great premise at a great beginning. I just remember finding it hard it didn't fully stick the end of its landing. I think it's because it got cancelled before its time. I think they had greater plans on where they were going to go.
I think what I absolutely love about American Horror Story specifically is that idea that it is an anthology show. So if a season isn't hitting with you after a couple of episodes, get about 3 or 4 episodes per season. If it's not hitting with you, leave it, move on to the next season. It doesn't really matter whether you've watched them all. I think we've watched about 5 of the overall show, 5 full seasons, but I don't think we watched them back to back. I don't think we watched season 1 through 5. I think we've picked which ones we like.
Yeah, no, it is great. Unfortunately, it is eclipsed by another one of the creators' great horror series, which is Scream Queens, season 1.
Season 1, exactly.
Season 1.
Yeah.
And then American Horror overtakes it.
Yeah, overtakes season 2, definitely. Definitely.
But American Horror is really good and scary as hell.
Definitely, yeah. There's some great stuff in there for horror fans. The episode was written by Colin S. Liddle. Done a few short films, but this is his first major writing credit. He's on the writing team for this show. I reached out to him over on Facebook and asked him about his experience working with John Logan. As we know, John Logan wrote most of the first 3 seasons of Penny Dreadful. And I just wanted to know what it's like working in the writer's room with him, because so rarely someone else comes out with a writing credit for a full episode, and having Colin Liddle getting this as one of his first credits. Just thought it would be interesting. He responded to me saying he's incredible, extremely generous and talented, creates an amazing working atmosphere for everyone around him, from the writer's room all the way through to production, which is just a lovely way to talk about John Logan, I suppose, because he does seem so heavily involved in the production of the show. So great to hear it from someone that worked on the show with him.
Yeah, that's really good as well, because when, you have this singular vision, and you've got to bring people on board, to that vision.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, that just really sounds, just consistent with how he would be. And from what we saw from some of the Blu-ray extras, for season 1 to 3 of Penny Dreadful as well. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'd be so interested, and Colin, I hope you listen to this and you might feel the chance to write into us at feedback@tvpodcastindustry.com. I'd love to know where the idea of the degenerate came from, that story that Michner, and we'll get into it later.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to know how that came about, and like, was it written word for word? Was any of it impromptu, based on Nathan Lane? I'm just so curious because it's such a powerful scene.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd be very curious, Colin. But other than that, great work.
Yeah, did a really good job. John, do you want to tell us what they gave us with the synopsis for this episode?
Sure. Molly visits Tiago at his apartment as he wrestles with guilt over Diego's confession. Dottie and Lewis confront Brian Koenig for lying about his dual allegiances. Elsa and Frank move in with the Crafts, igniting fear in Tom and Maria, and, of course, Friar Tuck. Alex Malone and Councilman Townsend deliberate about how to defeat Councilwoman Beck. Josephina's newfound faith puts her at odds with her family, and in particular, Mateo. Lewis enlists a reluctant Tiago to join his covert operations against the Nazis, and Maria summons Santa Muerta, but an uninvited guest arrives at the same time.
Yes, the synopsis from Showtime there for the episode. Lots of stuff in there, kind of hidden, and didn't want to reveal exactly what was going on within the episode, as we normally see with the synopses for the show. But lots going on in this episode. I think it's a really good setting episode for the final run out. There's only 3 more episodes to go after this week's episode, so I think they've set up all of our players in their places in this episode.
Bar one.
Bar one.
Yes.
Bar one. The one that we still can't figure out, but we'll get to. I completely agree with you. Like, this really is setting the final chess pieces, using the chess analogy that's given by Maria a few times. This sets all the players on the board. It's just Craft. I still can't figure this one out, but and poor Friar Tuck, but let's get into it.
Absolutely. I'm going to kick this week's off with my big moments from the episode. It's more of a theme for the show as we get into these final episodes of the show. One of the things that's really standing out to me now is how Magda is manipulating everybody. And I was wondering whether this has some comparison even to how Santa Muerta's powers protect people from the evils of the world. I'm wondering whether Magda's manipulations are kind of the reverse of that. She's the one that causes problems in the world, and Santa Maria is the one that can take them away if you pray to her, kind of thing. Considering, they're supposed to be sisters, they were supposed to be very joined together in the past, as we hear at the end of the episode. So looking at all of the versions of Magda and all the people that she's manipulating throughout the show, the way I'm seeing it so far is we have with Rio and Mateo, that she seems to be manipulating Mateo with pride in himself, and pride in his race, and pride in his belief that they shouldn't be downtrodden in the city of LA. It seems to be working with his pride on that. With Townsend in her version as Alex, she seems to be working on Townsend with the promise of power, that he will be the one to lead the country. She even says at one point in this episode that she's manipulating using the idea that he will get greater and greater power if he just listens to what her direction says. That's what it feels like.
Absolutely. To the utter shock of Councilwoman Beck. I thought that was just really nicely done.
Yeah.
I'm liking Councilwoman Beck a lot. I think I would be a new dealer in this time period.
Yeah, be on her side, definitely. it's not very well veiled that this is talking about a certain leader that's sitting in the White House at the moment. I think we have talked about it many times. That is John Logan's intention with the entire show, that it's reflecting or downright calling out what's been happening over the last few years, particularly in American politics. So this storyline of this atrocious, horrible man that is Townsend, basically bulldozing everybody around him to get his way to mayor seat, to senator, and then all the way up to the White House with the help of Alex, does seem to be a reflection of another famous politician, beginning with the same letter.
Yeah, no, the writing's on the wall and it's smack bang in your face.
Yeah.
I'll let you continue on because there's a few more.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel that with Elsa, the persona of Elsa that we see a lot of in this episode, I feel she's using lust to manipulate Dr. Craft. Chris, you were wondering how Dr. Craft fits into the future of her plan. And I think we don't know that just yet, but we get some indications here where she's kind of saying to him about basically getting rid of Maria because she's manipulating the kids and teaching the kids about another culture that isn't German and isn't American. So why is she there? So it feels like she's saying to him, in the future, you will be a great leader of the Nazi race, effectively. And this may be something that plays out in season 1. It may also be something that plays out if there is a season 2 or a season 3 where we see the continual manipulation of Dr. Craft into a leader of the Nazis, effectively. Just happened to be based in the US. So that's where I'm kind of seeing just from that conversation that they have.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what she's doing.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because she says, you will be a strong, important man and the world will watch, which is really kind of fairly impressive for effectively a general practitioner, doctor. So there's something there. And again, I suppose what's in the shadows still with Dr. Craft is what happened to him, or to his family in Essen. And obviously as well, we've only just touched slightly on the German-American Bund that he is involved with. But whether it's something to do with leading that as a political party, you just don't know. But I thought it was interesting that it came at the same time where you have Herr Goss with Brian Koenig, with Kurt watching sort of, on, I suppose, with his hand right on his Luger, his silenced Luger, ready to take out poor Brian if the need arises. That you have Goss talking about, these plans for when Hitler arrives, his new eagle's nest, he calls it, in amongst the new world where the Fuhrer can contemplate in his new eagle's nest in the new world surrounded by trees. So you're just kind of wondering, okay, this feels like it potentially will play out over longer period than maybe just season 1, if there is to be a season 2.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But I thought that was interesting that you have Goss saying this is the plans we're making for effectively Germany coming into North America, occupying it, I suppose, very much in the kind of feel of The Man in the High Castle. And then you have this idea that maybe Elsa is prepping this man to be this important figure that the world will watch. So,
and potentially leading that onslaught in LA when the Fuhrer arrives, I suppose, in the future to set up his part of the Nazi regime in LA. Yeah,
I mean, the only other thing I can think of is he is a doctor, and the Germans were hugely, the Nazis, I should say, were hugely obsessed with race and genetics, and this idea that maybe it's around something along those lines, in terms of maintaining racial purity, and hence why then she's trying to poison him towards someone who actually he seems to have a lot of respect for because of how long she's been in his employ and her relationship with Tom and Trevor. That she's trying to poison him against Maria, with that whole spiel in the bedroom. Yeah, so I don't know. These are just theories, really, in that sense, because it seems like this is almost a long gestation kind of period for what she needs from Dr. Craft.
But it might move massively fast as well. As I say, she seems to be using this lust of Craft to manipulate him. She's, maybe a week ago, 2 weeks ago, she's already gotten the wife out the door. She's moved in. She's got her son moved in. She's rearranged all the bedrooms in the house, got Maria moved down by the garage, and is already talking about getting Maria potentially out of his employ and off the property. And it's probably less than a couple of weeks, like that since they met first, going by the timeline of the show. So this could all happen really fast. You know, she might be just in absolutely the right place for Magda and this manipulation to just put him over the edge really quickly into this future plan that she has for him. But in this episode, we're really seeing, I think we mentioned it a little bit about Frank, this version of Magda that she reabsorbed early in the first time we saw him, reabsorbed back into the body. What we're seeing in this episode now is that he's a full persona of Magda now. Alive, living at all times, having conversations with Tommy in one room while she's having conversations with Dr. Craft in another room. So he's completely independent as a Magda now, I think we can say, right? If we were putting up a poster of who Natalie Dora plays in the show, it would be the four of them and maybe Frank as well. You know? So that's the way I'm seeing it. But with Frank, it seems like his manipulation is through fear, with Tommy. You know, some people could question why he's doing it. But if he keeps Tommy quiet, then it keeps the one that's questioning Dr. Craft about things that Elsa might be doing. He's going to keep Tommy quiet and out of the way while, Elsa does the manipulations on Dr. Craft. So I think that's why he's using fear to manipulate Tommy. I thought it was interesting. I don't know whether it says anything about the actor that plays Tommy's older brother. Trevor. Yeah. I don't know why, but it felt weird that the two of them were sitting at the table. Dr. Craft breaks the news to them and Maria comes in and helps out. And the only one of the two kids that talks is Tommy. Tommy's questioning everything. Tommy looks scared. Tommy doesn't want his mommy to go away, kind of thing. And Trevor's sitting there waiting to get back to his breakfast, it seems like. He gets no lines to say to his dad about his mom leaving. Like, is he just slightly older and he just accepts it? Or, you'd like to have a little bit of insight to that. But it seems like they're looking at Tommy as the one that's going to question and the one that's going to stand up for, his family, and maybe if Frank can rule him with fear and take him out of the equation, maybe that's the way that he's doing it. I know you're going to talk about a bit more about that relationship, John, but there's just one last manipulation of Magda in this episode that really stands out, which is Magda meeting Maria, which is a big scene at the end of the episode. But she uses family to manipulate Maria. Maria goes to ask the question of Santa Muerta, why is my family being attacked? And it seems like Magda's using the idea of family back on her, saying, I can save them if you just give up your belief in Santa Muerta and worship me, if you come and join my side, effectively. So this is part of the reason why I wanted to talk about this in here, was just wondering whether it does compare to Santa Muerta's powers. You pray to Santa Muerta, you can get help with prosperity, you can get help with clearing negative influences, you can get help with legal matters, get help with love, and you can get help with protection from dark magic. Those are the main powers that she has when you pray to her. And what we see on the other side here is Magda is manipulating everybody using similar types of powers. Similar enough, I'm thinking. Because I did name them myself, remember, from my notes. So there might be just other names that match a bit closer to
it's like she preys on the, this idea of the seven deadly sins, this idea of pride and greed and power, that could be Townsend, it's his greed for
gluttony.
And there's all all this type of thing. So it's definitely that kind of reflection back from what Santa Muerta does to the manipulations that Magda's doing. But I think this thing with Magda and Maria, and with Santa Muerta, Santa Muerta is still a bit of a mystery to me. She feels very passive. I was expecting some kind of interjection, and maybe if they weren't interrupted by Magda, she would have done. But there was that nice moment between the two sisters anyway, where, do you remember when you effectively forsake me as your sister? And she goes, I've lived with my decision. And she goes, no, but do you remember? And you just get the tear, and that kind of drives her away. So, I kind of, just because it's an area of, I suppose, this supernatural, spiritual world that I don't know a lot about. It would be really interesting to get some kind of explanation as to what that may be. I know Magda's not necessarily a real life,
so she's not, yeah.
But or just maybe where he's drawing inspiration from, even if it is like a made up history of that supernatural relationship between these two sisters. I think would be really, really interesting.
So I was questioning that too. Is the moment they're discussing the cornfield?
Yes, it feels like it, yeah.
It feels like that to me. Is the moment
yeah.
you've forsaken me for the humans. So when basically Santa Muerte protected Tiago, and well, when she started protected Tiago and didn't let Tiago burn in the flames that Magda set, because there was that initial discussion, and I went back. We don't fully know what the fight's about. Like in terms of what came before, but this is the fulcrum of where it looks like their relationships left.
Yeah.
In that she was like, there is this prophecy, I will do this prophecy, you will stand aside. And Santa Muerte was like, no.
Yeah. Yeah. Potentially that's it. And I think the response from Magda when she does, see the tear on Santa Muerte's face is, it's all worth it. I've now gotten you to cry, and I've now possibly even a river of tears is the way she's kind of saying it, or an ocean of tears. She's saying to her, I've cut a god. I've got somebody that is supposed to be very powerful, and they're crying because they can't do anything in the way of what Magda's saying. So while Santa Muerte is a passive character in a way, I don't think we're going to see her take out swords and go into actual battle versus Magda in this show.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think it's going to be like that. But I do think that would be consistent with the caring character of Santa Muerte to her followers. She's someone that you pray to, and she helps you out in situations, whereas Magda's someone that nobody really wants around because she just manipulates them using all of these elements. So
she does, but I did like the whole point that Magda kind of mentioned to Santa Muerte, is that, she says to Maria, you embrace Santa Muerte, the icy, who is basically the icy grasp of death, yet I'm someone that will listen to your every need and provide it, and you forsake me. Now, obviously,
that's a slight manipulation of what she actually does, which is she allows humans to do whatever they want to do, and her belief in humans is they all want to do bad things. So
but what I mean
is,
is
a protector that people pray to for her protection, and Magda delivers to humans what the worst possible thing they can do.
No, exactly. But what I'm saying is, it's kind of, actually the choice between these two ladies doesn't seem that great, quite frankly. Yeah. I mean, I know Santa Muerte seems to have, obviously, is not just going around, collecting her souls if you can pray to her for, prosperity or justice or purity of heart and so on. But certainly, in the material world, certainly, that of, I suppose, a blossoming consumer culture of 1930s America post the Depression, sort of awakening from that. She's certainly pitching her message, quite nicely, I suppose, to people, whether it's to bring themselves out of the slums, whether it is to re-engage with that as a middle class or upper class person in society. But I thought this, I just have to say, the set there, though, is great. It's so beautiful, even though it is like scary skeletons with teeth. But I mean, it is kind of, when you have Maria lighting the candles, and she's lit a few, and then it cuts to, I think, Tiago and Lewis, and it comes back to her, and it's all lit up. It's very, 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 very beautiful in terms of the set design. And of course, what a kind of amphitheater to have this battle between Maria and Magda, this verbal battle, which is just so nicely played out, I think is really, really good. I think as well, we get to hear that her spiritual guide, her spiritual animal, is the coyote. Yes. Which is interesting, because you had said, Derek, that there's a lot of references to coyotes in this show, And
there was one every episode for at least the first 5. We had some mention of coyotes, or a coyote watching on, or I'll feed you the coyotes, I think is mentioned to Brian, the first time he's threatened by Lewis. So it's something that's been in the background the whole time. Like, just kept going. Why coyotes? I know it's LA, and I know coyotes might be something scary if you live there, but it just felt odd that it was there. And then from the first moment of this episode where you see Maria on the bus.
Yeah, and she's got her little totem of a coyote.
Yeah.
And she's referred to as the old coyote. She goes, the old coyote knows. And I like the fact that Santa Marta goes, do I need to tell her how to look after her cubs? Because obviously she's looking for protection for her family. This is kind of interesting. So I kind of looked it up on Wikipedia or just on Google in general. And generally it's the very old coyote or the old man coyote, but it is generally a positive meaning in Aztec culture, was. But it symbolizes astuteness, worldly wisdom, and pragmatism, which is certainly things you could describe Mama Maria for. And I think the only thing is that it's normally male beauty and youthfulness, but it can be gender changing, which I thought was interesting, because it can also be about youthfulness and passion and sexuality, but that it's a balanced kind of symbol around good and evil, around this idea of being youthful. It can shape. So two interesting things. It can be a shape-shifting god, which, given what Magda does, I'm like going, is this kind of the counterbalance, or is this why maybe Maria, while she didn't see her or didn't seem to recognize Elsa, she said she could smell her, she could feel her on her neck of Magda, because I thought it was interesting that Maria didn't notice Elsa being or looking like Rio, given the intensity of that meeting with Rio.
Absolutely. I was waiting for it.
And then Magda. So I agree. I was kind of waiting for it as well.
At the end of the last episode, we'd said, she has met Rio, and then if we get into this episode, she's going to meet a second version of Magda. And then just to mess with us, it seems, the show has Magda appear in the opening scene of the episode watching Maria go by on a bus. So just to remind you, this is what I look like when you get over to Dr. Craft's house and you meet your one. That's me as well, but they do all look slightly different. And I think the way I'm puzzling it out in my head, because we're not getting any explanation on the show, is that we're seeing everybody as being played by Natalie Dormer, but nobody else is seeing Natalie Dormer is her exact face that way. She is covering herself some way, because it would be really stupid for a demon to be walking around in a city or an area as small as LA, or this area of the city that we're seeing over and over again. It'd be very stupid of a demon to not cover herself up, and realize you could bump into somebody that could recognize you and foil all your plots and plans. So my in-universe idea is that we're just seeing her look the way she does, but she doesn't actually look exactly that way to everybody else.
So I took it slightly differently. I took it as one of Magda's powers, if you will, is that essentially no one will connect the dots. Like as I think it was the other councilman when she meets Alex is like, who are you? You've come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
These are all figments or elements of Magda. So Maria could see Magda as she was in that opening scene, which is great. And we see her. I think she feels Magda everywhere because Magda is everywhere. She felt her with Rio there. She just doesn't know that Magda is Rio. So she can't connect those dots. So for me, it's like one of Magda's powers is that even if I walk out, I'm Magda, I'm talking to you as Alex, and then I walk into, I walk out the door and come back in split second later as Rio, no matter what, even if I look the same, you will see two people.
Right, exactly. Like, think of Scott Bakula in Quantum Leap. He's embodying a different person every week. We as the audience see the face of Scott Bakula, but everybody else sees what he really looks like.
Exactly, and
in their minds.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why for Maria, she said, "I can smell her, I can feel her on my neck."
Yes.
It's the sensation of being close to evil. You know, when people say we walked into this place and you could sense that it was evil. You know, when coppers talk about gruesome crime scenes and so on, that evil had been there or whatever.
Exactly.
And I think, so I was just going to quickly say this shape-shifting god. So I thought that was interesting. I wondered whether we're going to see Maria shapeshift, actually. If maybe she is imbued with some old Aztec magic or power, given the speech effectively she gives to Magda around being kings and queens with Aztec blood running through us.
Just to call out, just to a reminder as well. Remember, a similar speech was given by Rio to Mateo about who the Pachucos are. They are from royal blood of the Aztecs. So there is something there potentially in all of Maria's family. There is a direct descendancy from the Aztecs. Potentially, that's another one of the supernatural aspects that could be running in the show in the future. I normally end off this moment by saying that was my point, but that was kind of all of our points, talking about one of the biggest moments in the episode. My point was just purely about the manipulations of Magda and how they're possibly opposites of what's going on with Santa Muerta. John, do you want to take us on with another big point from the episode?
Well, it's quite a small point, actually. Well, it's R.I.P. Friar Tuck. It's a very small point. And to be honest, it's more about how Frank is freaking out Tom. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is this idea of the fear that Tommy has of Frank. And again, it's not something spoken. It's something that Tommy is getting. You know, it's instinct from Tommy around Frank that this is not how a kid of his age behaves, like probably none of his friends do. So it is the idea that he's a little strange and a little weird, but that then with the things that have happened to him, it always seems to be there with Tom, whether it was seeing the girl who had been murdered in physical form in his room during the sleepover for Trevor's birthday, or now we have this whole kind of moment where he's got someone who he was probably glad to see go out the door after the sleepover, suddenly being invited into his own home by his dad, and he's just like, this is not, no wonder he causes a fuss at the dinner table, where is my mum, kind of thing. And it's even just, this tension, you can hear it in the music, even as Elsa starts to effectively get Maria to make sure that Trevor goes into her room, she goes into the garage, and Frank moves in with Tommy because she worries about Frank. So she moves Frank into Tom's bedroom.
More chess pieces on the board.
It is. It's just, but the music's very sinister, and you just know that as soon as the show goes back to that bedroom at night time, that I would sleep like Tom does if I knew I had some kind of crazy melty boy that just melts into his mum. Not that he knows that, but I would be kind of bolt straight with my arms over the covers to stop anything from getting between them, and kind of staring sort of straight up at the ceiling. At the same time, it's like, it's just what happens. It's just how Frank kind of inserts himself to coming over and sharing the bed with Tommy. And then that Friar Tuck's in for a bad ride, really, on his spinning wheel, just because you've had that earlier scene where actually Tommy seems to be trying to get to know Frank and explain about Robin Hood, and brings his hamsters called Friar Tuck, and then it's just, then Frank's kind of just goes all weird on him, say, "What's an unusual creature?" As though he's never seen a hamster before,
or
he's never heard of one. Yeah,
like,
and
he's only been created about a week as well. So
it's and it's kind of Tommy's just got the little hamster in his kind of fist, just stroking the top of his head with his thumb, and I thought that was really cute. And then effectively to see the end result of all this with the dead hamster in the spinning wheel, I was like, kind of, Friar Tuck. And I was like, Frank, you
I know
bastard.
Yeah,
why have you done this? And it's the psychology that Frank seems to be doing, this fear, as you say, whether it's to help keep him quiet so that he doesn't cause problems for his dad. But I'm like going, surely Tommy is going to go to his dad and go, this is really freaking me out. But he might not do.
How many horror movies have you seen, especially ones set in the early 1900s, where kids go and try to tell their parents about the thing that scared them in their room, and the parents go, "Shut up, get back in the room." You're just.
I think that's just parents in general.
Yeah, you're just unnerved by somebody else living in your room that you've never slept in the same room with.
Because
before.
They don't want to deal with the Babadook in the closet.
Exactly. It's not because you told Frank that's the only thing that keeps you feeling safe in your room, is hearing the guinea pig go round and round in his wheel all night, and then he died immediately after Frank turned around and stared directly at him. It's nothing to do with that. Can't possibly be. There's no such thing as the supernatural. So yeah.
Yeah.
Is this the first kill by Magda? This is her first kill that we've seen.
What a success she is.
If you think about it, every other death has been not by her hand. She influences death and destruction.
Well, she kind of influenced a heart attack on the guinea pig, didn't she?
So you think
exactly?
So you thinking it's a heart attack?
I think she used the whisper to make the hamster run until it had a heart attack.
I don't even think it was that. I think it was that Frank doesn't even leave the bed. Like, he's lying in the bed. He turns over, looks over at the hamster wheel. The hamster wheel stops moving. He turns back over with those creepy, starey eyes at Tommy, and then Tommy realizes, my guinea pig is no longer moving, looks over, and the guinea pig isn't moving. It's not like they wake up in the morning and the guinea pig's dead.
Okay, I've had a massive sort of moment that I didn't realize, because they come back to it, because it doesn't continue there. It doesn't. They go, there's another scene in between, and then they come back to Tommy and Frank, and it's just that Tommy's lying in bed, and it looks like he's lying in bed alone, like Frank's gotten back into his bed.
Okay.
And you just see poor Friar Tuck on his back in the wheel. Yeah. And so, it could be a heart attack, but I just kind of thought that Frank had gone back to his bed, and in the process, kind of done a quick little twist of the poor hamster's neck, and then gotten into bed, because I thought he was then turning away from the hamster, which would mean he'd be looking at Tommy, but he wasn't. I can't. Okay, grand.
Oh no, he was in the same bed.
He was.
So he's turning back to look at Tom.
Yeah, with those scary eyes as the wheel is no longer moving. Yeah.
I took it. Yeah.
Anyway, it's still freaky.
This is her. She can communicate with animals, and she told the hamster to run until it had a heart attack.
Well,
because she didn't kill it like she didn't just because then why didn't she kill Councilwoman Beck?
Because she's a councilwoman, not a hamster.
But if she can make it look like a heart attack.
Before we get loads of messages in, it's a guinea pig as well.
Guinea pig.
It's a hamster.
It's a guinea pig or a hamster. Obviously, all of us have taken different notes, because I know both of you have called it either a hamster or a guinea pig, and I'm calling it a guinea pig.
Yeah, it's a hamster.
So maybe a hamster. So really sorry if we got that wrong to hamster fans and guinea pig.
Tommy says, "This is my hamster."
I'm sure he's a guinea pig. But anyway, that's fine. I'm sorry.
Okay, so whatever
rodent it is it doesn't deserve this death.
Very true.
No, it did not. But first of all, it's the first body count that we see directly at the mind or hands of Magda.
Mm-hmm. Didn't touch it.
It said mind or hands, mostly mind. Yeah. But this, for me, is the weird part, because she usually whispers. So she didn't go, she's getting so angry at like Councilwoman Beck at that point, that she now is going to get, and we'll discuss it later, she's going to get the Nazis after Councilwoman Beck. So I'm just like, maybe she can't influence. She can't just kill you dead.
Yes.
So that's why I was like, maybe she has to do the whispers. And the whispers are run until you have a heart attack, or it's shoot that gun, or it's like she cannot directly attack you.
Yeah.
She can influence.
She has no direct power. She's like a person under the age of 25 with an Instagram account. She's an influencer. She tells people what to do when they do.
Oh, shots fired.
Just because I'm not under 25 anymore, that's all.
But you're still on Instagram.
I'm not an influencer.
I think as well, she's got to play it more savvy, because Townsend has talked about getting rid of her before.
Yeah.
And she's just kind of like, well, no. But at the same time, in her conversations with her goss, it was more about, well, depending on if the time is right, and depending on how events move, maybe we have to, but for the moment, we don't want the light shining on us. We don't want to try and encourage that. So I think, because immediately after that, she talks about Councilwoman Beck being a problem to Townsend. Townsend says, you're a cutthroat political analyst, but now we need someone to effectively, cut throats.
Yeah.
So like this is kind of coming back to the promise, but yeah, I mean, I kind of still feel, even with Maria and Magda, I kind of felt that I was kind of in my mind saying, Maria, you're a little too close to Magda here. You don't know what she's going to do. I still feel that she could do something, but I suppose I'm coming around to your feeling, Derek and Chris, that yes, she's maybe a little, her power isn't in physicality, it's purely in the manipulation, but I still feel she looks pretty intimidating.
Her power seems to be in finding the people that can be manipulated and manipulating them in the way that she needs to, having that ability to be able to manipulate them. And as a Chajon, she does have to be much more careful with Councilwoman Beck than Frank has to with Friar Tuck, because you can't really flush Councilwoman Beck down the toilet.
Well, you
could.
But plenty of bodies have been found in the sewers. But
it's quite difficult to flush a body.
Well, bits of it, one at a time.
Might take too long.
You could. Gosh, it sounds as though I know about how to do it, which is not the case, fellow Dreadfuls.
So very much the way I see it is that Magda and Santa Muerte are two sides of the same coin.
Exactly.
The yin and yang of a divine angel, god, demigod, whatever. Their powers are manipulation through whispers, and that gets you to the end point. So you pray to Santa Muerte for money, prosperity, and what you get is Santa Muerte influences basically a lotto scratch card or a bank manager or a windfall, or you pray to Santa Muerte for a job and she influences you, the interviewee or interviewer. The Magda is the same way. If you prayed to Magda, which she tries to get Maria onto, and go, I want to become the new Führer, then she will influence, or Council Townsend. Councilman Townsend goes, I want to be powerful. I want power. Yeah. So she, through manipulation, through whispers, because she cannot directly go out and kill someone directly, she manipulates through all the different channels to her end goal in ultimate power is becoming the president of the United States of America at one point.
And that's where she's pushing Councilman Townsend. But I think the interesting thing with Magda is that she has almost that anarchist goal behind all of these people that she's manipulating, who may or may not be praying to Magda, or may not know that Magda's behind their success. Most of them will not know that Magda's behind their success, but they are getting what they want. But like the old monkey's paw idea, they're getting their wish granted, but the negative side of it is that it's all building towards, she's putting in those positions to get to her ultimate goal of creating fire and chaos in the world. Race against race, brother against brother, nation against nation.
Yeah, and I think it's going to come
John doesn't know the monkey's paw idea. Sorry, monkey's paw. That's from many fantasy stories. Effectively, the 3 wishes. You get 3 wishes granted, and you say, you know,
Like Aladdin.
Like Aladdin, but it's much more, there's always a negative impact for the wish that you want.
Yes,
you get given the wish, but there's something.
I've never heard it called the monkey's paw before.
Well, it's in original films. It started. One of them was the Twilight Zone, I believe.
Twilight Zone
was literally a monkey's paw, and every time they made it started as a kind of fist.
Oh, and the fingers
started as three fingers and a thumb, and as you made each wish,
it went down. Oh, I do remember that. Yeah,
and then at the end, so each one had a negative reaction.
Yeah.
Or like, I want money, but you get money because all your family die and you get inheritance.
Well, I do remember that. And actually that would fit in neatly with Maria, because let's face it, she has prayed to Santa Muerte, and there is a moment where I feel it's like none of that seems to have helped. I mean, in a sense, why she's going back again to pray to find out why her family's falling apart. But I just felt so sorry for Maria Vega. She comes back from a full day working at the crafts to prepare all the food for her family. No one helps her. Half her children are not there, so the table's only set for 3. And
she even used the good ivory cutlery for this special dinner that she's making.
She has a fight with Josefina, who also then doesn't eat and hasn't helped, doesn't do the washing.
Those enchiladas look good.
They look great.
They look really nice. And Raul is useless after the one thing that, you know, her prayer has affected, is just, you know, she goes, you sit and don't say anything. You know, it's good to know that Josefina has an older brother that can tell her. It's like, you know, she's seeing her family fall apart. She's doing all this work for them, and everyone's is a nightmare. And certainly after Mateo, basically told her to run and jump in the last episode. I was like distraught for the poor woman, because I think Adriana Barraza is just playing her so well. I feel so sorry for her, and I'm expecting her to become badass, because she is, just because of what she's having to put up with. But
also she's talking to 2 supernatural beings who are almost very threatening to her, and she's taking none of it.
Yeah, she really steps up.
Yeah, she banishes Magda.
That was cool.
That was awesome. But she does have a great line in Snark, though, I have to say, for Maria. Adriana Barraza just delivers some lines so good. I love when she's in that room in that argument with Josefina and turns around to Raul going, tell your sister I won't even listen to her nonsense anymore. Kick her out. And then Josefina runs away, and then she goes to Raul, you do nothing at all. You say nothing. You sit here and do nothing at all. And then that's it. She walks out of the room. I love the kind of sass and confidence that she has, even though she's really angry at everything that's going on. She just has a way of really showing it to the kids, you know. But yeah, I think you've hit it, John. Absolutely. Zombie Bro still hasn't had any kind of storyline since he came back from the dead, as we're calling it, at least, based on the prayer to Santa Muerte. But the cost of it is Maria's family is falling apart, and all of these bad things, from her point of view at least, all of these bad things are happening to her family.
Yeah. And yet,
and both families, actually.
And yet her contention that, you know, her family is at the center of this chess game, of this battle, our plan between these 2 sisters that she knows nothing about, you know, is absolutely confirmed here.
Seems like it
by the 2 sisters, really, in terms of that they don't they don't refute it.
But so this is they don't refute it. But I have a question: is Magda really after her family? If we look back,
no, it's using. I think.
Yeah,
I don't know whether she's after.
Because I took it as she was saying, "Why is Magda after me and my family?" So and then that's the way I took it, because this is when she describes, I know she's there. She's always at the back. I feel the breath on the back of my neck. She's after my family. She's destroying my family. And the only version of Magda directly going and targeting her family is Rio. Because when Magda at the riots in episode 1 was not directly targeting the older brother. It was not directly targeting Tiago.
No, but it's pulling them into the situation. Yeah. So Mateo possibly more directly than the others.
Yeah.
and it's not just Magda. I think it's a bigger thing between Santa Muerta and Magda.
And again, just to kind of go back to what we were talking about earlier on, I don't think Maria even recognizes Magda is Rio, Magda is Elsa. No. She's had no reaction to that. So while you're right, Chris, what we've seen on TV on these episodes is Rio has manipulated one of her children. That version of Magda in Rio has manipulated one of her children. What she's feeling is Magda's all around. My family is falling apart. Both families I'm involved in, the Craft family that she's been involved in since the children were only just born, that family's falling apart as well. This must be the influence of the devil, as we'd say in Christian faith and Catholic faiths. She's saying Magda, the demon of their faith, is the one that's manipulating her family and destroying them. She can't see it. She can't prove it. She doesn't know for definite, but she can feel it in her bones.
Yes. And that's why, bringing it back to my point, Friar Tuck was an innocent, cute little hamster / guinea pig / rat / mouse / gerbil / prairie dog.
Caught in the crossfire.
Just to cover all squirrel and / squirrel.
Okay.
Squirrel, yeah. But that's the thing I find just so funny, because that it's the presumption that now we know it to be true. We know it to be true. It's just that blind faith. The world is, my family's going to hell. I believe I feel the hand of the devil. It is, the devil is targeting me. It's just like, I take it as such a commentary, right? Yeah. Not just a commentary on people who blame kind of misfortune on fate, demigods, faith, religion, things like that. Yeah. Now, we know it to be true, but like in real life, like people do that as well. It's just, I found out that, and I was just like, it's really the way the nuance of what he's doing. Yeah. But strangely enough, it's true.
It is, but true in a different way. And that's kind of where I think we're having the question popping up for all three of us, really, is because it is true in a different way. We're seeing Magda impersonating 3 different people, manipulating people. That's been affecting Vega family, Craft family. What she's feeling is the devil is having a hand in destroying her family. She wouldn't be able to point to these 3 women in a lineup and go, this one is the one that's ruining Tiago's life. This is the one that's ruining Josefina's life. This is the one that's ruining Mateo's life. She wouldn't be able to do that. She just knows the devil, Magda, is involved in the ruination of her family. And you're right, Chris. There's definitely, this episode particularly has some damning commentary on religions and blind faith more than anything else, I think. Blind faith particularly, like religion, I'm sure, I don't believe there's any commentary on people who are religious, but having blind faith in things seems to be where John Logan has had the issue with people in the past who are religious, people who believe everything because faith says believe it all, rather than having a question, opening mind, and being religious. Seems to be where his perspective comes from.
Yeah.
Yes. So, gentlemen, I think it's about time we move on from all the supernatural
this is a great to
my point, which is the Germans. No. I'm joking. It's actually just because I wanted to say.
I know.
Every episode, we will get to the Nazis, but I want.
We are never covering a show that specifically relates to something in Germany, like Dark, for example.
No. Oh my God! Anyway, let's move off next.
We did get a request from one of our fellow watchers that we actually covered Hunters on Amazon. We actually covered the show. We've talked about it a few times. All watched it, all enjoyed it, and I'm never covering that show with you, Chris. There's no chance.
Okay, yeah. I'm not even gonna lie. I'm just like, I don't think I could do it with a straight face. I make too much light of terrible situations. It's the Irish in me. So yeah, I want to move it on to my main point, which is my second cousin, the degenerate. Well, first of all, you have 2 parts to this. We have Mitch. First of all, now we get the scene where Tiago and Michner are in Michner's Nazi hunting cave, aka his apartment. And we do get this great part where Tiago's pushing back, going, "No, I'm not going to help you with hunting these Nazis."
Yeah.
And this is where Michner comes in and goes, "Do you think I helped you for just being friends.
I love that.
You pay, this is my favor. I'm calling in my favor. I just wasn't expecting it to be as blatantly put by Michner on that.
Yeah.
I was just like, I was expecting that later on. I was expecting that in the car scene. But straight up, Michner's like, no. I've covered your ass. I've saved your family. You're saving mine.
Yeah.
Then he goes into speaking about his friends who have died. And we're reintroduced to Dottie, which gives us a classic where you see Tiago kind of go, her? Really? Like, and she goes, I was running guns in the Spanish-American War.
Yeah.
Before you were in diapers.
Didn't you
and he
give me
goes,
that look?
fair enough.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah.
I want someone in my life like Dottie.
She's awesome, absolutely. But yeah, I do love the scene as Lewis gets his Lewis Batman gets his Robin in Tiago. Very much. This is it's interesting because we did talk about last week, this idea of the misuse of power with the police, with these two going into the situation and making their decision as to what way they were going to proceed with putting Diego behind bars, and they were going to pin these crimes on him. And sometimes that story's just left there. They've done their job. They've put this guy behind bars, and that closes it off. What we see here is the episode opens with Tiago going, I've sinned, effectively. He knows he wasn't manipulated into doing what he did. He knows he didn't make a bad choice or a mistake. He's gone along with something that is a sin. And Lewis here going, I also know it's wrong. And I didn't just do it for your benefit. I did it for my benefit as well. I did it because it was the best option and the only way out for both of us in this situation and your brother. And I did it so I could get a favor from it, which is you're now going to help me take down the Nazis. So it's quite interesting that that's the way they played the storyline out from last week. This isn't something that is just, they made this decision as police officers to put this guy behind bars and that's it. They can move on and make other bad decisions in future. This is something that will prevail on both of these characters for the rest of the season, it seems.
I thought it was really good that Lewis reveals his own kind of private Nazi investigation to Tiago. But I loved it even more that it was around the events of last week that, he says, I'm collecting on your debt, basically, to me. And it even makes the scene at the end of last week's episode with, Nathan Lane does this really good thing where you kind of, certainly for the character of Michner, where he really kind of shows that he's processing everything that's going on with everything that's being said. And it's in this moment then that you kind of think he was like going, I can now use, I've lost Anton, I've lost my two wingmen, I've only got Dottie left. I can pull him into this and use this as leverage to effectively force him into it. Yeah. And I think that's kind of interesting. It's probably wise as he got to where he has got as a detective in the LAPD. So I really like this. Yeah.
So that was perfect. Thank you, John, because the way you said it, at that point, he forces Tiago into joining him. Then we move to the car scene. And this is the scene where Michner is explaining his second cousin from the Rhineland, which was invaded by Germany. He was a Jew and homosexual. He was the trifecta. Yeah. He was a degenerate, as they called him. Yeah. And we get the story of how when he was a child, his second cousins came over from the Rhineland and basically they swam in the sea and it was all nice, and he brought over Belgian chocolate, which is some great chocolate. Sure, it is, we all know. But then we get the story of how he unfortunately was killed via meat hook, and they took photos and film and sent it back to the Fuhrer to laugh at. But this changes it because, and the reason he brings this story is because he basically says, no, Tiago, we're not here to arrest these boys. We're here to kill the Gestapo in Hergos. Like, these men will die for what they've done. Yeah. And you can see Tiago bristle at, I'm not going to commit another sin. This is not my retribution. I won't be better by doing worse. But through this story, basically, it's no longer forcing Tiago, because Tiago then willingly believes in the justice of what they're about to do.
Yeah.
He like takes out the gun and he's like, it's a redemption part to a degree. Not killing someone's not redemptive, but it's softening it because he's doing the right thing. They're stopping this greater evil in the Nazi party coming to America.
Well, it's proper revenge, and I think Lewis has given Tiago the justification he needs to join in the revenge, I suppose.
Yeah.
One of the things I really liked about the story, Chris, and you're right, it is another great moment from Nathan Lane in this show. One of the great things I liked about the kind of framing of that within the overall narrative and within the placement of this particular episode and things that were going on around it. Lewis mentions that his cousin died on a meat hook and that it was filmed and sent to Hitler. Now, these days, you say something is filmed, and sent around online, and it takes 2 seconds. Everybody takes out their camera phone and it's sent around online. I like the way that it's set within the 30s, that all of these people are film fans. They're all living in LA. They understand something like the massive production budget that goes into a camera filming something. It's not like people had cameras in their house like they would have in the 60s or 70s. So this idea that they actually went out of their way to ship a camera to Berlin to watch this, as they called a degenerate, die, film it and send it to Hitler for a laugh. That's a massive thing. And I think they surrounded it so well in production that you do get the feeling why Tiago would go, these people are monsters. Like, it's a monstrous thing that these people did. It's much more than filming someone getting beaten up and putting it on YouTube. They've made a production out of this to show off to Hitler how much they're willing to do on his behalf around Berlin. And it sent a message all the way across the world to Lewis, who's going, these people can't be allowed anywhere near our country.
Yeah. And I mean, and the Nazis were at the, Goebbels was at the forefront of using in those days, the modern technology to just enhance the Nazi party propaganda. Absolutely. So whether it was movies, you think of the Nuremberg rallies and the staging and radio as well, and grand projets to cement the power. I mean, whole range of different ways, but one of them was the new media for that time, as well, which is fascinating within the current context, I think, as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the other interesting thing is that, Jews were targeted before the extermination camps, but so were, things like, homosexuals, disabled people, and Romanovs and gypsies. Yeah. They were even, in a sense, dare I say it, softer, easier targets to begin with in terms of various persecutions that the Germans did, as well as with the Jews. And I love the fact that with Michner's story, in terms of the degenerate, there's two parts of his cousin, because he's Jewish and his ancestry, and because he's a homosexual. That it is the biggest affront to this Nazi regime, and yet at the end of the day, it's something completely innocuous.
Yeah, and didn't Lewis even say he couldn't live based on their rules and how they run the society? My cousin couldn't live because he not only is a Jew, he's also queer. Like, it's two different elements that they couldn't possibly let this guy live on the rest of his life. Like, it's absolutely horrible even thinking about it.
And I think as well that there's little, from a historical point of view, something in Michner's story where he says, where he talks about this remilitarization of the Rhineland, that he says, but you probably didn't even hear about, you didn't even catch it, or it didn't even register with you. And I think that's one of the really interesting things as well. There was a lot of shouting at this, that there was more to the Nazis than met the eye in that sense. And that's just a little nod to that in Michner's story. And I think it covers, it's so well detailed about what's happening here. And it's a great story in that it brings Tiago from being a reluctant participant in this to one where, he gets his gun out effectively to becomes a willing participant as a licensed and registered detective to go and effectively collect further debts of Anton and the other guy. I can't remember the other guy's name.
Hergos.
No, the two Jewish friends of Michner collect their debt, repay the debt of their deaths. So I thought that was, it's a great little story.
Yeah. And this, as you jumping back a few minutes, we talked about how they did use technology, and in this case, radio. We're starting to see our threads are coming together. Our chessboard is starting to make sense, because outside of Councilman Townsend joining Hergos and Kurt, the Gestapo, who were just having a long discussion about how he was a cold-blooded killer icicle, and if he's if he's becoming a soft icicle, he has no use for him.
Are you a hard or soft icicle for Councilman Townsend, Kurt?
Yes. But then we see the councilman join, and Alex join, and I was like, cool. That's expected. I saw the other chair and I went, okay, maybe production just did it like that. But then finally, we now start to understand, because Miss Adelaide, Molly's mother, joins. And that is the point where I'm now starting to see, oh, wow, hold on. Like, they are going to use Molly. And I think this is something that, Derek, you back in episode 1, or no, when
probably episode
back in the episode 3, when Molly is introduced, you talked about how this was the newest thing. This was their internet. This was their TV. This was their shows, and it was beyond just an evangelical kind of big session. This was something huge, and I'm like, okay, now that the chessboard is starting to make sense in my head. We couldn't figure out how, I couldn't figure out originally how Molly was directly tied to the larger story. Yeah. And now we can start to see, okay, well, she's tied to this because she's essentially, her mother is using the church, or potentially will use the church as part of the Nazis' nefarious scheme.
Absolutely. She has been the whole time. And Molly has been manipulated the whole time, which means we could have Killer Kurt right here. Kurt could be the one responsible for the Haslets murders.
Oh, 100%.
It seems very likely he'd be the type of person to not just murder this family that needed to be gotten out of the way for Miss Adelaide and Molly's practice and the church. It's very likely he would go, do you know what would be a really good way to get them out of the way? If we blame it on somebody else, kill them in a style that leads the police towards the Mexicans. That is very likely something that Kurt and the Nazis would do. So I'm kind of thinking this is not the first meeting of Miss Adelaide and the Nazis. I think she's been there many times before. There didn't seem to be a huge amount of surprise from Councilman Townsend as such. There didn't seem to be, I don't know whether there was even an introduction between them other than he pulls the chair out as she sits down. So we need to see what's happening in that room, but I think this is something that's been going on for a long time. And I think we've just found our killer just purely from that connection.
Well, they're talking about the war to come following, Miss Malone and Councilwoman Beck's meeting. And, it almost feels, to me, we had previously at Trevor's birthday party at the Crafts, where Peter's colleague in the German-American Bund says we need to use radio. So there's been that kind of potential way in. But here as well, you're just wondering whether Miss Adelaide is So Alex says that you can take all the right-thinking people, and we'll take all the angry people that are remaining and ride that wave of anger and fear. And obviously, this to me is the meeting of that council to ride that wave, and some of it may be towards the death of Councilwoman Beck, and maybe it's something that it's Kurt, or they're gonna try and get Randolph, Miss Adelaide's sidekick, to do that. Maybe. Or it's just she will be the propaganda because she's not owned by the Catholics or the Jewish owners of the big media stations and radio stations, that they will be the mouthpiece to effectively preach and evangelize effectively hate from the gospel. So yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah,
I think
to get Councilman Townsend as president.
Yeah. And it starts to kind of open up what may actually happen for sure.
So I am curious. I wonder if, looking back at this now in a new lens, when Miss Adelaide, Molly's mother, is sitting with Molly talking about how she knows Molly is in a relation with Tiago and is sleeping with Tiago and in love with Tiago, this is why she gets extra angry. This is why she's against it, not because it's she's going away from her flock and all that. It's because he's Spanish American. He's Latino.
Oh, maybe.
There could be a Nazi element to this.
Maybe. I think it was more what wasn't said by her anyway in that discussion was that she loses the power that she's been gathering. She tries to get Molly to not go into the relationship because Molly would lose all the great things that she created. And Molly kind of says to her, and you also don't get the money from the church. She goes, we don't get the money from the church. But the other thing that she's probably getting out of this relationship with the Nazis is a lot of power, which seems to be something that's attracting Miss Adelaide. So I'm not sure whether it's anything specific down to racism. I think it's a bigger story for Miss Adelaide. I think it's a bigger thing. If Molly loses the power that she's gained, then she no longer has the era of the Nazis and has the era of what she probably believes is going to be a very powerful group. Yeah,
it could be. But I'm interested to see where this goes because straight away we get Michner and Tiago.
Yeah.
Guns are put away. He's like, oh, okay, this suddenly just got a hell of a lot more interesting. And as you said, and I'm taking it back, Derek, like this is set up our chessboard now. We pretty much know everything bar the crafts of who's our rooks, our pawns, who's our bishops and our queens and our kings. So it's going to be interesting to see over the next less than 3 hours, next 3 weeks, how they do this. And I have one comment, by taking it all the way back to the early parts of our episode where we say maybe they're setting up the crafts for season 2. Don't do that. Please don't do that, writers. Don't do that, John Logan, because you're not guaranteed that you're going to get a season 2.
Oh no, agreed.
And I think a more containing that story, this story, deeper is going to be interesting. I'm not saying if you get season 2, go alt history. That's going to be great. Yeah, bring Hitler to America and put him up and set him up and everything like that. That'd be interesting to see. To just tell this self-contained story, and I think that's the core bit. Yeah,
there's no question that we have no idea whether there's going to be a second season. There's been no announcement of that at all. I suppose the reason why I have it in my head that might be the way it's going is because the timeline that we're talking about seems very long. For only 3 episodes, unless there's a time jump, which could absolutely happen in the last episode. That could be a time jump that sets up season 2, perhaps something like that. But particularly the reason, and I don't want to overly spoil Penny Dreadful if you haven't seen it, but Penny Dreadful season 1, the big bad of that show is not Satan and is not Dracula. Those are the 2 big bads for the next 2 seasons. But those 2 characters are set up during the running time of season 1. They're mentioned as being people that are on the opposite side of our main cast, I suppose. Yeah. But they don't come out. They don't become the big bads within the first season of that show. So that's what I was wondering with Dr. Craft being played by Rory Kinnear. We're all interested in Rory Kinnear as an actor because we love him in other shows, but his part hasn't played a huge amount in this season. So I'm wondering, have they cast him in that role to keep you interested in something that may not play out this season? I hope it does play out more. And I think this episode is the one that gave us more about Dr. Craft than any other episode so far, but it's still not tying into the main storyline just yet. So maybe it's something that might just tie it at the end of the season for us to go, can't wait for the show to come back next season so we can see now he's Nazi Craft. Now we see how his hair really plays out. You know,
it's not like Minecraft, but
like
for
Minecraft
Nazis.
For Nazis, yes.
Because I keep thinking that Craft should be spelt with a K, not with a C. I'm constantly got that in my mind, for sure.
That's a type of cheese or butter in Germany, isn't it? In Switzerland, Kraft butter, Kraft cheese, isn't it? Beginning with a K,
it is. And on top of that as well, it's Craft Services.
Yes.
And Craft Philadelphia.
Something like that.
Exactly. But gentlemen,
No, I was just going to say one other quick thing from this whole thing around Michner, but just coming back to Dottie. I loved the moment that Dottie sort of reflects or echoes back to Brian in the cafe, in the diner, what effectively her Goss has just told him, that he talks about we are builders, not destroyers, as Goss is outlining where Brian's future lab may be in this new eagle's nest. And I really like the fact that Dottie here also in trying to explain that it's not just politics, because Brian kind of waves off, say the stuff that's going on in the media and in the press, that's all just politics, and I don't pay that any hoot. Yeah. And she gives the story of this Yiddish theatre with her and her father, which is really good, and talks about the destruction of that. I think it's earlier than the Nazis, but by anti-Jewish groups, as I say, Europe was rife with pogroms. Anyway,
she was talking about New York as well. And when she lived in New York and had
that came over as well, I suppose, on that journey across the Atlantic. Yeah. And she just reflects back that some men create, some men destroy. To Brian, who is kind of wobbling. And I do like in that moment that Brian, comes across as being visibly scared. Please don't let them hurt me.
Absolutely. And he does have that moment just before. He has that conversation where he says, well, some of their points are really valid and they respect my intelligence and they respect my science, unlike you. And you kind of think, is he on their side? Does he believe what they're saying? But it's so quick afterwards where he goes, please don't let them kill me. So you realize he's just terrified.
And I think,
which is the reference to him going to get a Yoo-hoo. I know when myself and John watched it, John was going, what's this all about? Yoo-hoo would be kind of considered like a chocolate milk drink, basically. So it's an indication of how young
like Yazoo.
Like Yazoo, is that what it is? Mm-hmm. But it's an indication of how young Brian is. He's the kind of person that won't go and get himself a coffee, won't go and get himself a strong drink. He'll go and get himself a Yoo-hoo. So that's why the reaction that you get from Lewis. It's like, oh my God, this kid is involved with the Nazis. He's got all this pressure on him. He's in college. And look how young this kid is. Yeah. It's just that little moment.
I think as well, it's the smarts of Michner to say, Dottie's going to look after you effectively, put you into hiding. She does have that nice joke about nothing's happened around the tar pits for 1,000,000 years. When the last woolly mammoth sort of went into it or whatever, or saber-toothed tiger. Yeah. But also, again, this instance in the car where he puts away his gun in seeing this collection of people from her Goss and Kurt to Molly's mother and Councilman Townsend, that, Michner's got smarts. He's really good. And I love how this character is.
Absolutely. Chris, that it for your final point?
That's it really is. Yeah. I just can't wait to see where we go from here.
Yeah.
And that's literally 7 days away.
Absolutely. Only other thing that we haven't really talked about in the episode is just the moment between Mateo and Josefina. I just thought it was interesting. It might have been a little bit heavy-handed for me.
Yes, 100%.
But I did think it was interesting, having that moment, because it's exactly the thing that Mateo didn't want to hear. And I suppose if you've got to squeeze in there that she's now part of this religious cult, effectively, it's a good way to get it started, where she kind of goes, I'm not the only one here for you. There's also God in heaven here for you. It feels like something she would say as she's just found her faith. It feels like she may pass that on to Mateo. It just saved her, remember, in that one session she had with Sister Molly, she feels saved and feels like God is there for her. So it does feel natural for her to bring that up quickly. It did feel heavy-handed in the episode, but it does lead to, I thought, a really interesting conversation. This idea of the incorporation of Santa Muerta into Catholicism has always been a question, always been questioned by religious people. This idea of people bringing parts of their religions and incorporating them into Christianity and Catholicism so that they can call themselves Catholic or Christians while still having pagan beliefs. We have it in Ireland quite a lot, with some of the elements of pagan beliefs that were in Ireland being brought and incorporated into the Catholic and Christian faiths over here. So I thought it was interesting seeing Maria give out to Josephina for going to Sister Molly's church, saying that's not even, you can't call yourself a Catholic anymore. You should be going to our priest. And Josephina echoing exactly the same sentiment back at Maria, going, how can you go to the church, get confession, when you don't even pray to God? When you need something, you go out into the shed and pray to Santa Marta when you need something. How can you call yourself a Catholic? So I thought it was a really good argument about the religion that they both are supposedly share. They've both lived under the same roof, both used to go to the same church, and now both of them have completely different things that aren't connected to that central religion. So I just thought it was an interesting discussion this episode.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It's going to be interesting. The one thing I will say is Mateo's overreaction to Josephina is just crazy.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm a little, I mean, in the best sense, he is literally self-isolating when he doesn't need to. It's kind of like he's overreacting.
COVID joke.
Yeah, well, too soon. But I suppose it's just this self-enforcement and isolation from his family.
Yeah.
It seems, I think you're right. It feels a little extreme and over the top in having a conversation with his sister that he would then run off and decide that he can never speak to her ever again. In the same sense that he's obviously applied that logic to his mum when she came to see him. And Tiago, I can understand more in a sense, because of because he's a detective.
Yeah, he's a grown-up as well. He's gone through a lot more in his life than Mateo has. And, you know, there are elements, again, of the religion side to that story as well with Rio. Remember, Rio pulled off the cross off his neck, saying to him he can no longer believe in that. He has to now believe in the religion behind the Pachucos that she has talked to him about. You know, there is that, I kind of get the reaction, you know, that is the thing. I laughed slightly or smiled slightly at the reaction, the line that Mateo says, which is, I didn't come here for make believe. I don't want to hear about this God thing that you believe in. I wanted my sister. I kind of smirked at the way that he responded to her, but you're right. The kind of running away and getting him out of there. But I think just to incorporate him in there, you probably needed a scene, to make sure that everybody knows that Mateo is still hurting out there. He's still not a trained killer yet. He's not going out in the war against the police. He still is very sorry for what he did and didn't realize that he could murder someone the way that he did with Riley. Yeah. So I think it's good that you have that little moment in there. And if you can't use anybody else in the family because they're all going through their own things, apart from Raul, who's just listening to baseball on the couch, you might as well use the relationship between Josephina and Mateo.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what the next steps on this chessboard is. Yeah. And I don't know if I want to go too far and try and figure it all out myself, but but at the same time, like, actually just tell me the story. Yeah. But let's get on with it.
I feel like there's a few things in this episode that kind of, you know, the coyote thing I thought was interesting. After noticing something was going on in the first 4 or 5 episodes, we now have an explanation for why it's in there. So I feel like we might get a few other things like that towards the end of the season that will explain things we're seeing now. So that's probably why I don't want to predict what's going to happen. One thing I did really like, and that's just going on to notes, I suppose. One thing I did particularly like was the story that that Maria tells to the 2 boys, Tom and his brother, about Hansel and Gretel. Remember them? They found their way home, and Tom instantly responds with, "Yeah, but they killed the witch before they got their way home," indicating that he may possibly have a battle coming up with one of the Magdas.
They may have to kill. I took that as well. They may have to kill. Elsa or Frank. But that's pretty cool, actually.
And also interesting, she did choose, you know, Hansel and Gretel. I think you mentioned the burial of Elsa's husband was in a very German folklore, a very German story book kind of setting, like Hansel and Gretel. So interesting they chose that to kind of explain the situation about his mother going away. So there you go. That was my note.
Nothing from my side.
Yeah, no, I've just got a few notes. I mentioned about the coyote. I didn't mention that the good evil on the good side of the shape shifting is around merriment and music and passion, and on the dark side, it's more mischief and pranks, but that ones that can get brutal and bloody, which is kind of interesting.
Will they kill hamsters?
Well, exactly. The Spanish-American War of 1898, because I kind of like this, that Dottie is speaking of her past, which is actually is like the 1850s and 60s, effectively, as a kid moving up, or because she talked about providing bombs in Chicago, and I can't remember what the name of that was now, but it was to do with one of the big labor disputes where the police were against the unions, and it kind of helped inform labor relations in Chicago, but it ended off with kind of Molotov cocktails or, bombs. It was fairly violent, but that Spanish-American Civil War is from 1898 and began effectively with the Americans coming in and intervening in the Cuban War of Independence between the Cubans and the Spanish, and effectively this led to the Spanish relinquishing sovereignty over Cuba, victory for the US, but they also ceded Puerto Rico in the same sense. So it was like this whole emergence of a US predominance in the Caribbean region, that kind of geopolitical thing, which obviously I think Puerto Rico is still, and what do they call it? A unincorporated territory of the US. Okay. So it's not officially one of the states.
Well,
it's a bit like Jersey or Isle of Man for the UK kind of thing.
Somebody tried to claim that was a reason to not help them out after a natural disaster.
Yeah, well, there is that as well. And the Rhineland thing was in 1936, which was the remilitarization of the Rhineland. So after World War I, it had been removed of all military, almost as a buffer, because it onto France, and then Hitler basically walked all his troops back into it. So it was occupied by the Allies, but there was no fighting, but Hitler marched his troops into the Rhineland, which was in kind of total contravention of the Versailles Treaty. And of course, it was the big industrial heartland of Germany to help build various bits and bobs of the military machine.
Some fascinating history stuff that's incorporated into the show, definitely. I've only got one final note, and that note was, I've read my notes and it says Friar took the hamster, so I did have hamster written down in my notes, and I thought I had guinea pig. That's it for notes.
Guinea pigs are a delicacy in, is it Peru or Bolivia, where they wrap them up in vine leaves, whole.
Yeah.
Crunchy.
You get the teeth. You got there.
It's not even the teeth, it's the bones.
No.
It's like crispy duck.
Oh, yeah, well.
Crispy ham.
I don't eat the bones in my crispy duck. It's the skin that's crispy, not the bones.
No, but you can. You can do it where the bones are just like almost brittle.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, moving swiftly on, gentlemen, I think it's about time we wrap up our discussion of ways that you can eat a duck or a hamster. This has been your dreadful podcast, but gentlemen, rather than going into culinary delights, let us discuss our final thoughts on this episode. I'll tee it up first. John, what did you think of this episode?
I really like this episode. In fact, it's really improved with our discussion. So I'm giving it, I had it down as 4, but I'm going to do, just for the macabreness of it all, is 4.5 spinning dead hamsters, out of 5. Wow. So I suspect there'll be, blood forensics required for the ceiling from this one.
Right.
I really like how, Magda effectively cropped up in different locations with Maria, and you have that final sort of rousing sort of banishment from Maria to Magda, and kind of invoking the kings and queens with the Aztec blood running through them in the same way that Magda did with Mateo. I thought was really good. And then I think, having all these different little snippets, Dottie is like, she's a walking history book and she's fascinating and I really love her. And Maria is just a powerhouse. Awesome. It's amazing. And just having the coyote element kind of just explained a bit further. As I say, I really hope that she's kind of a shapeshifter as well, and turns into sort of a badass coyote to sort of protect her pups.
That's how you do misprediction for the rest of the series, Chris.
Exactly. If you're going to fail in misprediction,
fail big.
Fail big.
And fail fast. Yeah.
Misprediction, it's like miscongeniality, but something like that. I loved all of this, and I think, the whole Michner, Tiago, Goss, and Brian, and Michner and Dottie, everything then linking into Alex and Townsend, and obviously now with Adelaide coming to the table of the Third Reich, it's just all really put into a really intriguing place, and I think I think that's really, really fascinating. And then just the sheer terror of what would be disruptive enough for the likes of Tom and Trevor, with his dad bringing this lady that he barely knows and this kid that he doesn't particularly like into their home, and his whole world being turned upside down from that, but having his brother moved then out of his bedroom, and just the creepiness that Frank brings. I mean, these two child actors are really great, actually. I think they're fascinating. I love the stoicism of Tom. He does come across a bit as an adult in kids in a kid's body, but he does give it back to his dad. He says, "I already have a mother and a brother. I don't want any more," and certainly not the likes of Elsa and Frank. And I think hopefully they are. Both him and Trevor are both Hansel and Gretel, and they're going to boil that witch alive and invoke the spirit of Friar Tuck as well. The hamster that we have finally nailed down as a hamster. To stop it spinning, we finally nailed Friar Tuck down. Exactly. So really like this. So 4.5 spinning dead hamsters out of 5. Christoph, what did you think of this episode?
I'm getting more and more pleasantly surprised by each episode. I do believe that the setting up this chessboard is making more sense to me, and it's where I was previously getting somewhat annoyed by I don't want to call it bloat, but it was narrative dissonance in a way that I was like, okay, I don't know where you're going with this. Like, I like to at least don't need to signpost it, but you at least need to tell me kind of what the end direction will be, aside from a prophecy about brother versus brother, nation versus nation, race versus race. Like, that could say a lot. That's basically World War II. So is it just that she's building World War II? Who knows? The annoyance I have and the outstand, I can't wait for each episode. I'm dying to see where they go with the last three episodes, 3 hours. It's just the Crafts.
Yeah. It's
such an interesting story. I just don't get it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm hoping upon hopes that come episode 9, we turn around and basically all of us go, oh my God, it was staring us right in the face. This was amazing. Well done, John. This was the best setup, the best story piece ever. I just hope that's where it goes to. Otherwise, if it's a setup purely for season 2, it will take the overall arching season and the creation of what he's done down a peg, in my opinion. Again, I'm not a paid critic, so what does my opinion count? But
we are here to listen to your opinion, Chris. We do have a podcast about the show, so you're allowed to give your opinion. So this is also about the man who has some pretty wild theories, so let's not go down that route. My thoughts sometimes are crazy. But overall, I like this episode. I wish I could fast forward 3 hours to see where I am at the end, but I'm looking forward to that journey more. Excellent. You and your binge culture, Chris.
Oh, go away! I'm not that young.
Say what?
I'm not that. Yeah.
Say what?
So, moving on to the other grey-haired man in the room. All three of us are slightly... We're distinguished.
Yes.
I'm
silver foxes.
Yeah.
But to the silverest fox of them all. Derek, what did you think of this episode?
Only because I'm not able to go to the hairdressers, Chris. That's all it is. Yeah, I think overall this is a good episode. It's a good place-setting episode for the season. But I think if I look at the point that I chose for the episode to describe it, that's exactly where my head is at about the show at the moment. If you looked at it without taking account of what the overarching storyline is, the story of a guy trying to get a road built in LA, the story of a guy who cheats on his wife and brings his lover in to move into the house with his kids. You know, those kind of storylines are pretty pedestrian. They've been around in every type of show, from soap operas to science fiction movies, you know. But viewing it through the idea of these manipulations will lead to a war, a battle, will lead to what this demon Magda wishes to happen with the city of LA, with this central point that's going on, with all of the characters. I think that's what elevates this show into something really interesting to watch every week. So I think this episode really accomplished its job in getting us set up for the final battle at the end of this season. And I think everything that's going on in the manipulations and seeing Maria trying to investigate in her own mind why is she so heavily involved really did make this episode exciting and interesting. And yes, that final scene with Maria versus Santa Muerta, a rival of Magda, and then the disappearance of Santa Muerta after the two sisters battle, have their battle of wills, and then Magda versus Maria is just stunning. Great scene. Really loved it.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think we're all on the same page. Gentlemen, I do believe it's time for a penny for your thoughts, our feedback section, where you, our listeners, write into us with your thoughts, your feedback, and everything in between, specifically on this episode. So don't forget, if you want to be involved going forward, you can send your thoughts to feedback@tvpodcastindustry.com or join us on our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/tvpodcastindustries, and just make sure you put your comments into our spoiler post for that episode. Over on Facebook, we did get one piece of feedback on this episode so far, which was from Claire Laffa, who said, loved it and loved Maria. I want my very own outfit that Rio wears. And my final thoughts on the episode, Nathan Lane is still amazing. I love how the character has shown such darkness and such vulnerability. There are a lot of actors and actresses that I admire, but there's only a few that I really love to meet, and he's one of them. Thank you, Claire, for that feedback. And yeah, I'm right there with you on Nathan Lane. Every show I'm seeing him in, and even just watching his press coverage for this show on the likes of like Seth Meyers and Steve Colbert and stuff, I'm like, I love you even more. It will force me to go back and watch Birdcage.
Excellent.
But I've avoided that one just because of the Robin Williams, because I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready.
Oh, you'd love it.
I know I will. It's just one of those, I have to go back, but I kind of have to.
And Gene Hackman is amazing.
I forgot. Is Gene Hackman in it?
Yes, he is, yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know what you mean, Chris, though, watching someone as talented as Robin Williams after he's passed, watching him in one of those kind of roles is always difficult, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's well worth celebrating, you know. He's such a good talent, and he's very good in a very different role for Robin Williams. Really good. And great to see Nathan Lane in that as well. Yeah.
But definitely, I'm with Claire as well. I think as every episode of this show goes on, you know, I would love to meet and hear Nathan Lane's thoughts. I think he has done an amazing job of providing sort of that breadth and depth to this character. And I think the same is for Adriana Barraza as well. I've absolutely loved their just how they have brought so much to their character, and with not that much screen time as well. I think Nathan Lane has now gotten quite a lot of it, but I think at the start, you know, focusing on Tiago, and I think Maria has been on the periphery a bit. So that's the thing, this coming back and forth in different episodes depending on how much you have there. I think like they're the two I'm rooting for in this for sure. I think they're amazing.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much for that, Claire. I'll agree with Claire. She wants every outfit owned by Rio. She wants to own all of those. Claire does. I want to own the outfits by every guy in this show. I don't know why we don't dress as well as these guys do. I love the style in this show. It's absolutely amazing.
100%. I want to just wear Magda's leather. That's something completely different.
Just not in the LA heat.
Yeah.
I can't imagine. I
feel very sorry for her.
I would be sort of have to be yanked out of that if I was put in it.
Maybe when it gets later on in the summer, Chris, we can get you one of those dresses, send it over to you, get you to take a photograph of you in Magda's dress.
Yep, I do it.
28 degrees temperature.
Yeah, just put me in a locked room. I'll sweat it out. Lose a few pounds.
There you go. As the podcast room is getting up to about 250 degrees, let's move on to our next piece of feedback. Thanks for that again, Claire. Voicemail from Steve Brown.
Hello, Derek, John, and Chris. This is Steve. This is for the latest episode of Penny Dreadful. I think it actually is episode 7 this time. We are barreling, fast towards the end, and I'm anxious to see what happens next, but at the same time, I don't want it to end. I love new content. I love all the stuff that we're getting, and so much happened in this episode. I'm going to watch it again tomorrow morning, but I wanted to send this out just in case I don't get a chance to send something, my initial kind of thoughts. So I really loved that we finally do get a little bit of the supernatural aspect at the end there when we see, the grandmother kind of dispelling Magda, sending her away, and we see Santa Muerte walking away from her. I'm not really sure exactly what happened there. I'm going to have to rewatch the episode to really get a clear idea. I love the fact that Michner, and it seemed to me like Michner had Tiago convinced to just straight up murder those Germans. And then of course they pulled back when they saw Townsend and Alex show up at the restaurant. But Tiago was all in, ready to follow him into battle, and after hearing about how his friends were killed and all that. And I wonder if we are going to see Kurtz start slitting some throats, because as Townsend said, he told Alex that she's cutthroat, but maybe we need someone that can actually cut throats. So we might see Kurtz actually do some damage. I don't know, but a lot was set up in this episode. We're seeing the religion that Josephina is starting to embrace, going against her grandmother's wishes, her mother's wishes. I'm sorry, and then also we're seeing Tiago's brother, both his brothers, kind of being affected. So, okay, I can't wait to hear what you guys thought. Talk to you later.
Thanks so much, Steve. Another manipulator in this episode with Lewis. There's good points. Like, he does manipulate Tiago into going along with him and killing someone, when 2 episodes ago he was completely shocked by the idea that Mateo would murder someone as well. So even at the beginning of the series, I think he even spoke to Lewis about the fact that Lewis hadn't shot his gun very often in service. And now, a week or 2 into service, he's being asked to shoot his gun. Yeah.
Well, I think the first of all, thanks, Steve, for the feedback. I think there's that really nice moment at the start, and I think it kind of links, Steve, to the idea of Josephina kind of rebelling and going to the temple rather than to the Catholic Church and Father Nunes, and even taking up Santa Muerte. Mm-hmm. But we have here Molly rejecting her mother's advice by connecting back in with Tiago. Maybe there's some ulterior motives now that we've seen her mum having din-dins with the Third Reich. But that's kind of interesting. But also, I think we're set up here with Tiago's mindset, where he goes, have you ever done something where there's no right answer? Everything you do will be wrong. You do something, it's not a compromise, it's not a mistake, it's a sin, or it's just plain wrong. And it's that aspect of what he did to protect Mateo and what will ultimately happen with Diego. And that's his mindset. And effectively, Michner connects it into that totally to manipulate him into doing that. But then thankfully pulls back as well. It's a really interesting moment, but I think that scene at the start with Molly really sets up kind of the mindset of Tiago quite nicely, I think.
Yep. Thank you so much for that feedback, Steve. I can't say much more than the boys have said.
Absolutely. One other thing I will say is that I know what you mean, Steve, about new content. I feel like I'm getting like some proper TV addict now. When somebody tells me a new show is on and it hits me, I watch the whole thing in a day, and then I'm like, oh no, I've got to wait 5 months for new content. We watched Upload in one day. On Amazon Prime, and then somebody said to us that the new season of Queer Eye was on, and we watched 5 episodes of that yesterday. Like, I'm not holding on to the content like I should. It's like I should be hoarding it to dole it out to myself over the next couple of months, because we've only got 3 new episodes of this show, and then that's it for a little while. I'm not sure what the next big thing is, other than The Boys, I think, is coming, and Umbrella Academy is coming during the summer. Those are the only 2 things that I'm aware of up until like September.
Well, that's true. Yeah. And we watched more than 5 because I was blubbing for at least sort of 6 or 7 of the 8 episodes that we watched of Queer Eye, for sure.
Yeah.
It was like I'd just gone...
hours.
No, well, pretty. It's like I'd just gone to a funeral or something.
It's so pretty. Look at the dresser. The colours match the drapes.
No, the stories of the people that they're helping and the dresser. And why can't they come to Ireland and just decide to do that? But it was very emotional.
It certainly was, yeah.
They need to come to Ireland and sort me out. Basically, someone could put me on Queer Eye for the Straight Guy. They don't even call it Queer Eye for the Straight Guy anymore, don't they? They call it Queer Eye.
It's just Queer Eye now, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it's for everyone.
Exactly.
More inclusive.
Yeah.
It was the original that was Queer Eye for the Straight Guy.
Back in the 90s, yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose we've kind of finished talking about Penny Dreadful. One of the things I always notice when we watch a new season of Queer Eye is there's 5 of them there. One guy gives them a little bit of a haircut. One guy talks about does their clothes. Another guy helps them with their confidence. Another guy helps them do their cooking. And then the last guy, Bobby, does their entire house and maybe their office and gives them a new car and
sets up their business.
Sets up their business for them. And he gets about 2 minutes of every episode, and everybody else gets 20 or 30 minutes of the episodes. And Bobby and his entire team have done a whole makeover show of the building and the house, and he's ignored on the episode. He just gets a couple of minutes at the end of it. This is number 5 seasons. He must be like, can I have my own makeover show, please? Can I have, I'll make over
I'd
people's
say
houses.
It's coming. I say justice for Bobby is coming.
Yeah, there you go. Anyway, that's right. Any other points about Penny Dreadful before we go out? By the way, thanks so much for the feedback, Claire and Steve. Any other points about the episode that we have before we go?
No, I think that's it. I think it's about time for a quick tipple before we head home.
Yes, it's the Penny Dreadful pub quiz, and it's been a morning of heavy drinking, just like Tiago, as we discuss putting away an innocent person for the crimes of your own brother. So yes, a real strong morning drink is required down at your local. And this week's local is the Dreadful Pub Quiz Bar. Yes. So this week's question for all you intrepid pub quizzers is, what plays does Dottie Minter recount from her performance days with her father at the Yiddish Theatre? What plays does Dottie Minter recount from her performance days with her father at the Yiddish Theatre? So she names a few there, both with names and without as well, I think. So yes, please, answers to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. You can send them in on a episodic basis as we go through them, or chuck them all in right at the end and submit them in time for our recap episode where we go over all things Penny Dreadful, City of Angels.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for that, John. Really enjoying these questions each week. You can get all the questions by going over to our website at tvpodcastindustries.com. There's a tab there where you can just go and see all the questions that we've asked so far this season if you missed any of them from our episodes. Thanks so much once again for joining us. Please stay subscribed to TV Podcast Industries. If you want to contribute and if you want to get access to our Captain America, The Winter Soldier podcast, go over to patreon.com/TV Podcast Industries. Or, of course, just share the podcast with any of your friends, because sharing the podcast is sharing the love.
Yes, thank you so much. Obviously, we'd love to have you as a Patreon because, unfortunately, we have just lost one hamster. We need to replace him to keep the lights on. As John said, we have an army of hamsters in wheels keeping electricity running here. But if you can't, sure, as you heard at the top of this episode, we had a great review. Why not rate us and leave us 5 stars on your podcast platform of choice? Because obviously that will always help us.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And I look forward to speaking to you all again next episode.
Yeah. Thanks so much for all the support, fellow Dreadfuls. It's really great to get that. We'll be back next week with Penny Dreadful, City of Angels, episode 8, Hide and Seek.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, boo.
Absolutely.
Chris,
will you help me be a good brother?
Oh, God.
Oh, so creepy.
Chris, can I get into bed with you?
Well, that's a different question. And on that note, all 3 of your podcast hosts are about to jump into a bed and stare and kill a gerbil, hamster, rodent, mouse.
Thing.
Bye, everybody. See you next time.
Bye.
Thanks so much for joining us, fellow Dreadfuls. Really great to have you on board for this episode. Keep watching, keep listening, and remember, keep spinning.
Whee!
Bye.
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 God, we're losing it.
It's the heat.
All right, stop.
No, I think that's it. I think it's about time for a quick tipple before we head home.
Yes, exactly. It is the Penny Dreadful pub quiz. It is early morning. Yes.
Early morning?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm tripping over my words today. Instead of symbolism, I went to Derek. I was like, "Oh, it's symbol-y."
I looked up the symbol-y of the coyote in the episode. I was like, "What's a symbol-y?"
It looks like a symbol, but it's symbol-y.
Yes. Well, in 2 days we have done over 5 hours of podcasting, so that's. I totally understand why brains.
No, we all have.
It might be a little fuzzy today. So totally okay. John.